Hi everybody! Welcome to Real-World Ethical Hacking. This course will be presented in 7 modules covering everything from networking fundamentals to ethical hacking methodologies. The material is based on my experience as an ethical hacker working in the industry. So let's get started with the very first module called Networking Fundamentals for Ethical Hackers. Welcome to Lesson 1.1. What is networking? So in this lesson, we're going to talk about what networking is and some of the basics that every ethical hacker needs to know. Alright, so let's start off by answering the question. What is networking? Well, networking is simply the exchange of data between devices. That's all it is. You got one device over here and another one over there, and they need to communicate with each other somehow. They can either talk directly to each other, which is possible if they reach close enough, or they can talk to each other through an intermediary, which is typically referred to as a server. So whenever we have a scenario where you got a client talking to a server, we call that a client-server network. Now, depending on what type of communication you're having, there are different types of networks that exist out there. So for example, if you want to broadcast information to a large number of people at once, you might want to use a broadcast network. And then there's also peer-to-peer networks where the computers are both clients and servers at the same time. But for now, we're just going to focus on client-server networks because those are the ones that are most common in corporate environments. And most of the time when companies hire ethical hackers, they want them to focus on client-server type networks. So in order to understand how client-server networks work, let me introduce you to the concept of protocols. A protocol is basically a set of rules that two communicating entities agree upon. For example, if I was trying to talk to somebody who only speaks Spanish and I try to speak to them in English, we are not going to be able to communicate very well. However, if I take the time to learn Spanish, or if they take the time to learn English, then we'll be able to communicate a lot better. It's kind of the same thing with networking. If a server and a client are using completely different protocols, then they won't be able to communicate properly. However, if they're using the same protocol, then they'll be able to understand each other. And the most common protocol used in networking today is TCP or IP. So that stands for Transmission Control Protocol, Internet Protocol. Most people think that they are separate protocols, but really TCP is actually part of the suite of protocols known as TCP or IP. These protocols define how data is transferred across a network, and they've been around since the 70s. So there are a ton of protocols in the TCP or IP suite, such as IGMP, ARP, DNS, and many more. But in this particular course, we are only going to focus on a few of them. Specifically, we are going to focus on TCP, UDP, ICMP, and DNS. By the end of this course, you'll have a pretty good understanding of how these protocols work. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there are many different types of networks out there. You have LANs, WANs, CANs, etc. In fact, let me show you a table right now that shows the different types of networks and their characteristics. So the first one over here is a local area network. It's relatively small in size, covers a small geographical area, relatively fast speed, and it's usually privately owned. The next one down here is a wide area network. It can cover a large geographical area, relatively slow speed, and it's usually publicly owned. So the main difference between a LAN and a WAN is basically the speed and the size. So LANs are faster and smaller, while WANs are slower and larger. The next one over here is a metropolitan area network. It's relatively large in size, covers a large geographical area, relatively high speed, and it's usually privately or publicly owned. And then the fourth one over here is a wireless local area network. It's relatively small in size, covers a small geographical area, relatively fast speed, and it's usually privately owned. Next one over here is a personal area network. Relatively small in size, covers a very small geographical area, relatively fast speed, and it's usually privately owned. And then the last one over here is a controller area network. Relatively small in size, covers a very small geographical area, extremely fast speed, and it's usually privately owned. So the main difference between a LAN and a WAN is basically the speed and the size. So LANs are faster and smaller, while WANs are slower and larger. Alright, so now that we know the different types of networks, let us talk about something else called network topologies. A topology refers to the layout of a network. So how exactly do the nodes or devices connect to each other on a network? There are several different topologies that exist out there, such as star-bus, mesh ring, and hybrid. A star topology is probably the most common topology used in computer networks. In a star topology, all of the nodes connect to a central device, such as a switch or a hub. So for example, in a typical home network, you would have a router which acts as the central device, and then all of your computers, printers, and other devices would be connected to that router. So if you wanted to communicate with someone else on the network, all you would have to do is send your signal to the router, and it would take care of forwarding the rest of the signal to the intended recipient. A bus topology is a little bit older and less common than a star topology, but it still has its uses. In a bus topology, all of the nodes are connected to a single cable known as the backbone. So for example, imagine you have 5 people in a room and each person has something to say to one other person. In a bus topology, everyone would stand in a line and take turns talking. This can lead to a lot of wasted time and effort, especially if there are a lot of people in a room. So in this scenario, it would be much more efficient if we had everyone stand in a circle instead. This is similar to a ring topology where all of the nodes are connected in a circular fashion. The main advantage of a ring topology is that it is very efficient because each node only has to listen to the node directly to its left or right. A mesh topology is similar to a star topology except that every node has a direct connection to every other node. This provides redundancy so that if one connection fails, the other nodes can still communicate with each other. A hybrid topology is simply a combination of 2 or more of the previous topologies. For example, a hybrid topology could be a star bus topology or a star ring topology. And with that ends our first lesson. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below, and I'll do my best to answer them. Also, if you found this video helpful, make sure to hit the thumbs up button and subscribe for more content. And with that being said, I'll see you guys in the next one.